Right, shall we make a start, everyone? The mic seems to be working, so good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's local election hustings brought to you by the Stray Ferret. I'm John Plummer, the editor of the Stray Ferret, and tonight is your opportunity to put questions to candidates standing for election to the new North Yorkshire Council on the 5th of May. Just before we start, a couple of housekeeping items. Fire exits at the doors at the back, obviously at the front where you came in. There's a toilet in that corner there, and please could everybody switch their phones to silent or off for the duration of the event. We invited candidates from all 5 parties that are standing in Harrogate to attend tonight's event. The Lib Dems, Labour, the Greens and the Independents agreed to do so, and thanks to them for attending. The Conservatives declined. We asked each party to send a person who can represent all of Harrogate on their behalf rather than a particular division. The reason we are staging this event is because local government is undergoing its biggest shake-up in 50 years. Next year, North Yorkshire County Council and 7 district councils, including Harrogate, will be abolished and replaced by a new unitary authority called North Yorkshire Council. Whoever is elected on May the 5th will serve on North Yorkshire County Council until the new council comes into existence on April the 1st next year, vesting day. They will then transfer to the new North Yorkshire Council for a further 4 years. There will be far fewer councillors, serving considerably larger divisions for a longer term than is usual, so there is a lot at stake at these elections. Tonight's format will be as follows. We've got some more people coming in. Each candidate will have a strict 2 minutes to present their case as to why you should vote for him or her. We will then put forward questions posed in advance by Stray Ferret readers. There will then be a 15-minute interval when refreshments will be served in the foyer at the back. We will then reconvene at about 8 p.m. for questions from tonight's audience. If you'd like to submit a question, please speak to my colleague Calvin Robinson. Where is Calvin? He's there at the back putting his hand up at the interval, and give your question to him. We aim to finish between 8:45 and 9 tonight at the latest. Tonight's event is being live streamed on the Stray Ferret YouTube channel and will also be available to watch afterwards. We also plan to publish an article about it in the morning. Tonight's event will focus specifically on Harrogate and prioritise questions about Harrogate, because the election Harrogate is particularly impacted by the reorganisation. The loss of Harrogate Borough Council raises major questions about who will take control of the town's assets, such as the convention centre and the Stray, what will happen to council offices in Napping Mount. And hopefully tonight the candidates will give us their thoughts on these issues. The Stray Ferret was set up more than 2 years ago and now regularly has more than 200,000 monthly users. One of the reasons it was set up was to deepen engagement in local politics, provide a platform for debate and to scrutinise public spending. And tonight's event is part of that remit. We're not here for the clickbait. Local election, not an easy sell. Please do keep reading us. Thanks for attending tonight. Download our app and I hope you enjoy the event. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to our first candidate tonight, who is Chris Watt, who is standing for Labour in the Fairfax and Starbeck division. And hopefully this mic will work. Chris, thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction. As was mentioned, I'm Chris Watt and I'm standing for Labour in Fairfax and Starbeck. And thank you all also for coming, because these sorts of events are really important for our local democracy. I moved to Starbeck out of choice over a decade ago, and I've chosen to stay living in Starbeck because Starbeck and Fairfax are a wonderful community. I use our local facilities like Fairfax Community Centre, like Starbeck Community Library, and like Starbeck Arts, which, as the Stray Ferret reported, I led the campaign to get reopened after it was unnecessarily closed for too long after lockdown by the Council. So I just abandoned the microphone because I'm not sure it's working very well. I go to the one in the middle. Thanks. I use our local shops in Starbeck and Fairfax, and that means I've seen the impact that COVID has had on our local economy, with too many premises remaining empty. And our council needs to do more to support our local high streets for local people. As I've been out and about on the doorstep, local people have been telling me about the problems that they've had with antisocial behaviour, and I will continue to work with the police, as I'm already doing, to tackle this blight on our communities. I've been working with local residents to oppose unsustainable new housing developments in our area. I spoke at the council meeting on behalf of local residents last year when a major development was turned down, helping to persuade local councillors to reject that. Those sorts of housing developments not only destroy our green fields, but they also put pressure on our local services, like our schools and our NHS, which I am proud to work for, and they cause an increase in the problems that we've got in our area around traffic congestion and local parking. I will do. Like my local Labour colleagues, I am proud of the area that I live in, and I want to give something back. The chance to serve, that's all we ask.
Thank you, Chris. Now hand over to Philipp Broadbank. Would you like to take the mic, Philipp? He's the Liberal Democrat candidate for Fairfax and Starbeck. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chris, for that as well, for saying that. We've shared in a number of the campaigns, haven't we, over the last 2-3 years. My name's Philipp Broadbank. I am Harrogate born and bred. I lived in Starbeck for over 40 years. I've been involved in lots of local organisations, groups over the years as well. And obviously I'm quite passionate about the area we live in, because I too lived in when I got elected, I lived in the ward next door, Granby, and then moved into Starbeck after they'd elected me, which I thought was important to live in the ward. It's not necessarily important, but it's something I wanted to do. I think there's lots of issues. Obviously, the local issues in my ward, Chris had mentioned, so I'm not going to go through that because we've got 2 minutes only. Issues that I think are important for the Harrogate housing, affordable housing, I think is important. And I think the various improvements to council houses and retention of council house stock, sometimes to things like energy efficiency and so on, various initiatives like that are important. Investment in public transport, trains and buses. People are going through cuts again. And that's something that if we're going to try and discourage people from using the car, we need to have a good public transport system. The economy needs to be supported, and we want to make sure that the local economy remains strong, and is strong, continues to be. And I think that's something that we need to make sure the new council does. And the other thing is the council itself. We need to make sure that democratic decision-making is brought to as close as possible as it can be under the new setup. It's a big council. We are the 4th largest in the UK, 620,000, and the 2nd largest area-wise. It's very important to have town council and local democracy.
Thank you, Philip. I'll now hand over to Sarah Hart, who is standing as an independent candidate for Harlow and St George's. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, John. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for attending this evening. The new Unitary Authority deserves a new vision and a culture. This Unitary Authority is basically the first time in 40 years it's the most important election, and Harrogate needs a voice at the Unitary Authority. We need independents who care about Harrogate with no party line to toe. It is a time for change, and the Harrogate and the wider district deserves better. I am standing as an independent candidate in the Harlow and St George's division. I have lived in Harrogate throughout my life, but returned in 2012 to bring up my daughter, who attends a local state school, and we live in a division. I work throughout North Yorkshire, and I have seen North Yorkshire for its rawness of how bad some of the services are currently. And I believe that independents can work collaboratively together who represent their communities and get things changed. We need a community-led plan. So my priorities for Harrogate, in my division, are we need to stop any more house building until the local plan is reviewed as North Yorkshire as a whole. The plan was signed off by both Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats, and we need to listen to the community and devise a full infrastructure plan with current up-to-date data. Congestion, particularly school congestion, I will work with local schools and families and work together to devise solutions to attract central government funding. We need smaller buses on a wider network with lower fares to attract higher occupancy rates. And we need to see the bus being used as a credible alternative to the car. We need to find alternatives that takes people out of the cars and basically onto sustainable transport for just not the few, for everybody. We need to stop the Otley Road cycle path. It's clearly dangerous. It's a waste of taxpayers' money. Yeah, sure. And we can look at not sending the funding back, but we can redirect it to promote the existing cycle routes, and the Rotary Wood and our green spaces should be valued, and we need to declare a climate emergency.
Thank you, Sarah. Sorry to just for the next part, do we have a mic that works for when we have to hand it over to the candidates? And just for the last candidate to give their presentation now, we'll introduce Bill Rigby from the Green Party. Would you like to come here, Bill? Thank you very much.
Yes, good evening. I'm Bill Rigby. I'm an ex-teacher, an education consultant, senior officer for some time in 2 county councils, following that with being an advocate for children with special needs, and finally at a vice-chancellor of a university in Uganda. Former town councillor since I moved here into this locality 8 years ago, and mayor of Knaresborough. I'm standing in Killinghall, Hampthwaite and Saltergate. A bit of context here. We've been warned about climate and ecological disaster now for 70 years. We see species extinctions and tragic climate events every day. We now know from reports to the US Congress that the petroleum industry and others have been systematically undermining these stark warnings with deliberate misinformation. The consequences are grim. This is as relevant to Harrogate as it is to Bangladesh. The corporate spreading of lies via the media and lobbying is compounded by the mistaken political view that the market solves all our problems. This is where the Green Party differs from the others. In terms of the immediate local context, I'll mention just 2 examples, housing and transport. Our housing policy, driven by central government, merely serves greed and not need. Too much inappropriate housing, and still fitted with gas boilers. So we will now have to upgrade both the old and brand new housing. All the roofs which could have been covered with PV panels and the lofts insulated to keep down energy bills are going to be there in the queue and need to be sorted. When the Tories came to power, the planned upgrades to building regulations were relaxed. The high proportion of rented homes mean tenants are unable to afford improvements and landlords unwilling to meet the costs. Meanwhile, local transport services actually drive people away from buses and trains and back to their cars. We need fewer cars and for public transport to improve and treat us with respect. Fares increase while services worsen, and the only gain is for shareholders, mostly based abroad.
Well, you've now heard from our candidates tonight, and for the next section, we've got some questions that have been posed in advance by Stray Ferret readers. I'm going to attempt to move the mic to each candidate before they speak, so hopefully this will work rather than have everybody coming back and forwards on this rather narrow stage. The question was submitted by a woman called Andrea on Twitter, and it says, what will you do to ensure local services and roads can cope with the ongoing building of new houses in and around Harrogate? Bill, you went last time. Do you want to go first this time? Just let me know.
Testing. Oh, good. Well, as I indicated in my hastily concluded presentation just now, the main way you can solve the traffic problem is by reducing the number of cars on the roads. And this is not as foolish as it sounds, because it needs, first of all, a positive policy of improvement to local transport services, both train and on the buses. And if that were done with seriousness and sensible approach, with proper involvement of the community, the needs would be met without any capital involvement particularly, and without any distress to people. But of course it must be comfortable for users, and the transport system must be set up in a way which respects users. Therefore, for instance, providing bus shelters, such a simple thing, and also providing proper facilities at the stations and proper timetables and staffing of the train system.
Okay, thank you. Sarah, would you like to go next?
I think it's really simple. Basically, what we need is the right homes in the right places. What we don't need is any more 4 and 5 bedroom executive homes in Harrogate. We need more homes for people that are local people who work in here, who can't afford to live here, and they need to be in sustainable locations in public transport corridors. And we need to actually look at empty buildings as well. So we need to renovate those and basically buy in those fundings that you can get from central government. So we need to look at a more holistic approach, and therefore we need to get people maybe out of their cars, which we do need to do, but we need to also think about everybody. So it's not just about cycle routes. We need a more holistic view to look at everybody. So our community that are disabled, we need to look at our young children, mothers with pushchairs, who can't necessarily just walk around Harrogate. So they need to have housing in more sustainable locations, and actually the infrastructure needs to be put in the first place before we start building all these homes, because it's just, we cannot take any more homes in Harrogate. It's ridiculous that it takes 45 minutes to get across town. So my bottom line is we need housing in the right locations and the right type of housing and full infrastructure plans.
Thank you. You don't mind if I sit down as well? Yeah, I think the important thing, first of all, is investment in public transport. You have to encourage people to get out of the cars, use them less than they do. So you need a good, substantial investment in public transport, and the new authority would be in a better position to do that. You also need encouragement for cycling, and encourage people for short journeys to walk, as they used to do. Several of the housing, I don't see why we can't refurbish. I said 20 years ago in something I did on housing, I don't see why we can't use the upper floors of town centre properties, shops, encourage town centre living, and I think that's something that you can do. But you need to improve the bus service, the trains, and the substantial investment that is required will have to come from the new North Yorkshire Council, plus, if this ever comes about, the government's funding shared prosperity fund, the money that they used to pay to the EU. We've got to make sure that's sharely fared out, and North Yorkshire, a large rural area, needs support for the transport initiatives, and the various things that we can do to discourage people from using cars. I think that's absolutely vital.
Okay. Thank you, Philip. And finally, Chris Watt.
Thank you. Well, the first thing I would do is to continue to work with local residents to oppose unsustainable housing developments in areas where there's not adequate infrastructure. And a lot of these housing developments, if you take the one, for instance, that's on Kingsley Drive, where I'm particularly involved in supporting local residents, those developments around there, they've got so little social and genuinely affordable housing. And that's what we need if housing needs to be built. We need proper social and affordable housing with a proper infrastructure in place. Second thing I do is to continue to lobby Northern Rail to reverse their proposed cuts to rail services along the Leeds, Harrogate, Knaresborough and York line, because that's just going to discourage people from using public transport. Also continue to lobby Transdev not to cut bus services that are serving the Fairfax area, for instance, but also to support them. And it's very, very disappointing that the government didn't give our area any money for sustainable bus services in its recent announcement, because Transdev had actually been proposing to put electric buses down the one route, for instance, from the town centre down through Knaresborough Road, Starbeck High Street and through to Knaresborough. So I'm hoping that that will still be able to go ahead. We do need extra incentivisation for cycling, for walking. I also supported, for example, Starbeck Primary School when they supported the excellent initiative, the Walk to School Day that they had a couple of months ago. And national initiatives like that, which loads of our local schools got involved with, are also a great way of tackling this issue.
Thanks, Chris. Just moving on to our second question, which was posed by John Holder. How do you see the Stray being used, and who should be in charge of it? The 1985 Harrogate Stray Act currently designates Harrogate Borough Council as the protector of the stray. Obviously, when Harrogate Borough Council goes, who should be in charge of it? And how should it be used? Sarah, would you like to start this?
Well, first and foremost, the Stray is actually an act of Parliament, so the protection is actually that act. So at the moment, Harrogate Borough Council is supposed to be the guardian of the Stray, but are they? I mean, look at the UCI cycle event. It absolutely destroyed a part of that Stray, and it was disgusting how it was left. So I feel that the Stray, basically, we should be protecting our green spaces. That is the green lungs of Harrogate. We are known, I mean, on Saturday, the amount of people on Cherry Tree Walk taking photographs, it's a tourist attraction, is the Stray. It brings people into town, so we need to protect it. And I think if there's a Harrogate Town Council, maybe they protect it, but it's the people of Harrogate who should protect it and respect it. And actually, the local government should also respect the Stray. It is governed by a parliamentary act.
Okay. Chris, would you like to give us some thoughts on this?
Yeah, thank you. Sarah's absolutely right about the 19th century Parliamentary Act, and I'm not sure if the government have actually thought about this or changed the legislation around who governs the Stray, but one thing I'm very clear about is that there should be a local community voice on the use of the Stray. So if we don't have a Harrogate Town Council, which I very much hope we will with proper powers, there should be a local voice for local residents on how the Stray is used. I do think there's a bit of a balancing act about how exactly it's used. So Sarah mentioned the Tour de France, and whilst I agree with her very much that it was appalling how the council left the Stray so boggy and dug up after that for so long, on the other hand, the Tour de France brought a massive investment in our local economy. So we need to be able to use the Stray as a local tourist attraction, but also to protect it at the same time. So I think there is a bit of a balance to be sought on this one.
Thank you. You want to go next then?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the Stray is the most wonderful gift to the community here. a relic of the Enclosures Act 252 years ago, or whenever it was, when the Forest of Knaresborough was enclosed. It is a privilege, really, for this community to have such a thing. And I agree entirely with people who say that the community should be closely involved in its management, however the national legislation is worked out. And certainly I would support the idea of a town council for Harrogate to enable it to have autonomous control over its own affairs. But the particular value of the Stray, of course, is that it's an open space, potentially an ecological privilege for all of us to learn about the environment and its impact on our lives. So it's an opportunity there for us all to learn, both in not only from a recreational point of view, but from an educational point of view. And we should grasp the opportunity to take back control, so to speak, of this particular facility.
Thank you. Philipp.
Thank you. Yeah, the Stray is obviously unique. It's a unique feature. It's fantastic. I've used it as a child. Obviously, over many years, it's been a great asset to the town. And it's one of the features that when you mention Harrogate, they all say, yeah, the Stray. It's great. It is protected by, it's not 19th century, they updated the legislation. 1985 Act is the one that covers the Stray. And communal activities are currently covered by, I think there's a maximum 35 days where they're allowed to use it for communal facilities. And that's not, I'm not aware of any changes coming up for that. But, I mean, yeah, it's great to have events, big events sometimes on the Stray. And yes, the Tour de France was fantastic, and for the town economy as well. The UCI turned out to be a disaster, but that was partly due to the rubbish weather. And I agree, it took ages to clear up the Stray, and that was unnecessary. It should have been done a lot quicker, and we should have got something back from the people who organised the event as well, a lot more than we did. We did get some, but not a lot. So the Stray itself is unique. I mean, you're talking about the Stray. There's also the Valley Gardens, I think, is something where their events could be looked at as well, because they do bring people to the town. And the town, the economy, needs people around the shopping centres and town to keep the place prosperous and vibrant. So I think as it's protected by the 1985 Act, I would not welcome an extension to that. I think the 35 days usage is adequate, and I think the general usage of the Stray for everybody is great, for local residents as well as other people who occasionally come to put events on.
And do you feel that who should be the protector when?
The protector should be it must be a local town council. Will have to fight for a local town council, because otherwise it would be hopefully the area committee would have to have the councillors on the area committee. Harrogate and Knaresborough area committee would be the ones who actually make decisions.
Is it fair to say you all agree there should be a Harrogate town council controlling the Stray? Because otherwise it could be decisions made in North Allerton. Yeah,
well, that's the danger. I think Harrogate, initially, because the town council will probably take about a year after the new authority has been set up, if people want it. And I think for the first year, they need to make sure that the area committee have powers to make decisions about things that are unique to this town.
Okay. Thanks very much. And that leads us on to our third question, which was put to us by Margaret Hansard, and she asked, when the new authority comes into being, how can the people of Harrogate have their grievances aired on local issues without being put into a melting pot with the rest of North Yorkshire? So this is going to be a very large new local authority, so how do we solve that problem? I'm trying to think, do you want to go first again, Chris?
We've just spoken about Harrogate Town Council, and I think actually all of us on the panel are agreed about the importance of that. But it is going to be a very important issue. And the problem is, at the moment, we've got one major party who has a massive majority. If I may be a bit party political, I suppose that's allowed at a party political hustings here. But what we need is more of a diversity of voices on the council. We need strong opposition on the council. We need a greater diversity of councillors on the council. And we need people who will stand up both for their local areas, and certainly my first and foremost priority if elected as a councillor would be to stand up for the ward that elected me, but also that stands up for our local area. It is going to be an issue, unfortunately. There's no getting away from that. I don't think there are any simple answers apart from electing people who are going to stand up for the local area and give a strong voice to us.
Okay, thanks. Sarah, do you want to go next this time?
I actually think it's really simple. As an independent candidate, I care about my division. I live in my division. My daughter goes to school in my division. And I will be an accessible councillor. And we need people to represent the residents, and we need to listen to residents. And that's key to be a councillor. And that we need to fight for everything in our division within the wider North Yorkshire Authority.
But how can you do that, given that it's going to be a council based in North Allerton and you're...
Well, I think we need to look at democracy, John. So we need to basically look not at the current system at North Yorkshire County Council. It's an executive system where there's only a handful of actual councillors who make the major decisions. The scrutiny committees, you know, they can sign off certain things, and then when it gets to the top layer, you've only got a few people that can do that. So you need a wider democracy and a different governance structure. So I think that's really what needs to change with the North Yorkshire Council, is a change in their governance structure. And that's how you can get representation throughout the whole of North Yorkshire Council via your councillors.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's great that we should change the governance structure. I've always opposed cabinet and executive. We have cabinet, Harrogate, executive, North Yorkshire. And I've always opposed that. I like, when I first got elected, there were committees, and councillors with local knowledge were elected and could speak and raise issues that they knew about, because they had the local knowledge, and they had a vote, and then the full council would either ratify or reject whatever they decided. That was the best system in my view. And the legislation, and it's legislation that created this new setup, it needs to change. We need to have local authorities should be able to decide what kind of system they want for their councillors. I mean, obviously the town council as well. You could need a town council for proper local decision making, but we need to have councillors who actually can vote and can have a real say in the issues that come up, instead of just being, I mean, at the moment, the area committee, for instance, is we're mainly consulted. We're consulted on issues, and then the executive of North Yorkshire confirm or reject, whatever. It's not the most democratic system, but it's the one that we have to work with because the law says we have to work with it. You can't change at the moment. You can't get rid of executive or cabinet systems unless you want a directly elected mayor who has the power to appoint certain people to the position and run it from that way. That isn't something either. I really don't want one person to have all the power. I think it's just going back, it's going back to the system that worked up until 2002. It's the most democratic system. People who get elected to the council, local knowledge, that know the area, they can pick up on issues. The officers will put the technical point of view. Local councillors with local knowledge can have the input and help influence the decision making. That's what you need. And I go back to it now. Lobbying Parliament is the way to do it, to change the legislation. That's the only way you'll get rid of the cabinet executive system that we've got.
Thank you, Philip. Finally, on this question.
Yeah. Well, thank you. The first thing is, of course, that there are 16 or 17 councillors who will represent Harrogate itself at North Yorkshire. So maybe in the short term, as soon as they're elected, they should decide as a group to identify themselves as a group and share all the issues affecting Harrogate itself. But secondly, the town itself needs to, as we've already indicated, I think, to go about the business, hopefully before next May, the May after this, to have a proper town council with a lot more individual representation for local people, so that their views can be properly represented. I reflect the point made by my colleague on the left here about diversity. Within local communities, diversity of opinion really matters. During the last 20 years or so, or at least the last 12 years, there have been one party in government, one party at the county level, and one party at the district level. And they all work in the same office. And this has led to the fact that everyone has been subservient to one person's ideas in some remote place. The lack of diversity has been to Harrogate's disadvantage, and this, we hope, will change in this election in May, and certainly within a new town council, perhaps following a year later.
Okay, thank you, Bill. We've just got time for one, possibly two more questions before the interval. We've had a couple of questions on this next issue, which was sent to us by Malcolm Margolis and also Andrew Gray, and they're both asking the same point really. Do you support the 20's Plenty campaign for North Yorkshire, which calls for a default 20 miles per hour speed limit as soon as possible in towns and villages where people live, work, shop, play and learn? Who should we ask first this time? You haven't been...
This is one of those questions which, from one point of view, is a no-brainer. If you drive more slowly, you kill fewer people. This is the first important thing.
Well, why do you think it doesn't get implemented?
The second thing is that in congested areas, such as towns like Harrogate is at the moment, slowing down the traffic actually increases the flow, as well as the well-being and safety of the people there. And certainly in areas where there are young people and busy activities going on, it is extremely important that traffic goes more slowly. And it also exposes the fact that the hierarchy of need on our roads and public spaces. Who in fact matters most? The driver of the juggernaut, the driver of the Ferrari, or the pedestrian, or the parent with a child in a pram? We surely know that in any common sense, just terms, the priority goes with the human individual and against the lowest priority, that of the juggernaut. Certainly engineering will obviously help with this to separate the two, or all the categories of people, but when we have to share the space, we must be clear that the priority is with the individual human, and particularly with the individual human who is unable to think, either because of disability or disadvantage or age, is unable to be totally alert in the context of traffic. We should really abandon this business of the priority of the monster motor vehicle. And it's in everybody's best interests, including the motorists.
Sarah? Do you support 20 mile per hour?
Yeah,
limit?
so I do actually. My daughter went to Weston at primary school, and on Coldbath Road, since Beech Grove was closed, the traffic has got extremely bad. She's now left there. But I actually did campaign to get the SID signs actually on Coldbath Road to try and slow the traffic down. So I really do support Malcolm with 20's Plenty, actually, because my daughter used to walk to school, and it was actually quite dangerous on Coldbath Road. Travelling, trying to cross Otley Road to get to school. The only safe place for her, and this was before Beech Grove was closed off, was actually Beech Grove. But actually, Colbath Road, the number of times, and I've seen the head teacher move children out of the way of traffic that actually got onto the pavements right outside the school. And actually, this local council, county council as well, would do nothing about it. They wouldn't change, put some gates up to stop the traffic from coming near the exits of the school. So I really do support, actually, Malcolm and 20 Plenty and the campaign for that, because we need to make, especially near schools, we need to make it safer for children to be able to walk to school instead of using the cars. And the other thing, obviously, with cars, you also need sustainable transport to get to those. So buses as well, they need to be able to go slower. I've seen buses go down Colbath Road doing 40 miles per hour, and it's not acceptable. So I think 20 Plenty is really good around schools, and it needs to be accessible for all, but we do need to sort of really back up that campaign.
Chris?
Do you want the short answer or the long answer?
A short one, please.
Yes.
Okay, well, there seems to be a lot of support for this, but as somebody who's currently a councillor, why is this not happening then?
Right.
And do you support it?
I shall explain. Yes, I do support the principle. In fact, it's not a new idea, because 20 years ago, we put this, Reg Marsh, Pat's husband, put this to the council, and it was approved. Around Hookstone Chase, it was introduced. I have to say, not many people stick to it. Then you've then got the problem of enforcing it, and it's a problem trying to persuade the police to enforce restrictions like this. They'd say we've got far more other things to do, and so of course that then gets back to the elected members at County Hall, and they say, well, if they're not going to enforce it, members think, well, what's the point of introducing it? There is schools on the main road are a problem to enforce a 20-mile limit, but generally speaking, I don't see any reason why you can't have a 20-mile limit in most of the areas. It's just certain areas outside on the main roads there might be an issue, but again, it's just persuading the police to enforce what's there, and that has always been an issue, because they've got staff problems, staff short, and all the rest, and they say, well, I'm sorry, we've got other things to look at rather than that. And it's a shame, because as you say, 20 mile an hour is the right sort of speed to go drive through if you're in a built-up area. You don't know what's going to come out from vehicles behind. So yeah, it's right, but the problem is persuading the police, and the elected members take advice from the police, and if they're not prepared to enforce it, then some elected members think, well, what's the point of introducing it if it's not going to be enforced?
Okay, thank you. We've got about 2 minutes to the interval, so just one very quick last question. I think it's an interesting one. It was submitted on Twitter by somebody who calls themselves Terrible Tim. Apparently his real name is Tim Evans. Do the candidates think a council office based in Northallerton is local? This goes to the heart of the changes. It's not been officially announced yet, but it seems that the new local authority will be based in Northallerton. Just very quickly, do you think this is a good change, and is it local government? And can you just try and literally give me a quick sentence? Do you want to go first?
Short answer again, no. The Tories have spent all this money on the new council offices when they must have known this change was in the pipeline from their friends in government. So we should be using those council offices for the benefit of local people in Harrogate.
Okay, that's great, thanks. Bill, can you give us a quick answer?
Well, it's certainly extremely difficult to think of it being local. I agree with her. I must say I worked once in Lincolnshire County Council, and which included Long Sutton in its purview, which was an hour and a quarter's drive. So, you know, unfortunately, it's not a unique situation.
I used to cover Long Sutton. Just very quickly, please.
Yeah, very quickly. No, I think the new council is far too big, and I think it's up to the new elected members, by the way, to decide where the headquarters will be. Now, I don't know whether Harrogate will be put forward as an option. I don't know, but there's lots of buildings at Northallerton that they've just refurbished. So that would give an indication that the majority of members who come from, let's face it, Scarborough, Settle, you know, are they going to go to Northallerton or are they going to go to Harrogate? The Harrogate Council offices, yes, they've just spent 13 million plus on that, and how they're going to use the building will be something again for the local members. I did ask at County Hall about the future. They're talking about possibly using the existing district council as a sub-office for the area, and if most of the local issues that you get now from Harrogate, they say you'll still be able to do it, but it's up to the new elected members to decide what the future of that building is going to be and where the headquarters will be.
Okay, and just finally, Sarah.
I actually think, yes, if that's what they want is Northallerton, but actually the narrative is around really local services should be provided in local areas. So actually we need to do devolution and actually sit within the narrative of what they actually got their asked to become a North Yorkshire Council. So we need local facilities where people, for local residents, can contact councillors and officers. So actually, I don't think Northallerton is the option. It's the wrong option.
Okay, thanks everybody. We'll now have a 15-minute break. There's going to be some refreshments in the foyer. Please help yourselves. If you have any questions for the second half, please can you see Calvin at the back, who's just putting his hand up again now, and put them to him, and we'll then give you the mic in the second half where you can pose your questions directly to the candidates. So thank you very much, and we'll reconvene about 8 o'clock. Thank you. Okay, we'll get things going again. Hope you're refreshed. Thanks very much for your support so far. We're going to move on to the next and final part of the proceedings tonight, where we invite questions from the audience. We've had quite a few, so that's great. We'll try and crack through as many as we can, so we'll try and keep the answers brief, and can I also ask that you keep the questions brief and punchy to the point rather than make a long speech. I'll read out the names of the people who have put the questions to us, and then Connor here will hand over the microphone to them. So if I read your name, if you could just put your arm up so Connor knows who to take the microphone to. I think the first question is from John Hansard. I think it relates to housing, so would you mind just... Thank you, John.
Yeah.
The question is it right that the Harrogate Borough Council, as it stands at the moment, despite having 1,700 surplus in housing stock, continue to accept applications from major developers to build hundreds more on virtually every spare piece of green space available in the town? And do you think that this situation will become better or worse with the introduction of the new Unitary authority?
Okay. Sarah, would you like to start on this?
Yeah, so the local plan that was signed off a few years ago now, so that figure you mentioned, unfortunately, the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives did sign off on that local plan. And the other thing that the way developers can get away with murder is policy, actually, within the local authority. So the officers can have stronger policy, and we don't necessarily need all these houses. So if we had stronger policy, then the developers wouldn't be actually able to build all these homes. And there are mechanisms to stop them from doing this.
But where are all these people going to go? There is a need for housing, isn't there?
There is a need for the right type of housing, though, John. What we don't need is any more 4 and 5 bedroom homes, but what we do need is homes for local people who are connected to Harrogate, who work in Harrogate, who currently, if you go around the town, it's actually now affecting our economy and our social care sector. Businesses cannot recruit people because people cannot afford to drive here now or get on the train because it's too expensive, and they also definitely can't afford to live here. So we need the right homes in the right places.
Do you think things will change under the new Unitary authority?
The councillors have a remit to basically be strong in their demand on the officers. And the officers can do things differently. There's different ways to deliver affordable homes. Affordable housing is not affordable. It's as simple as that.
All right, thanks very much. Philipp, your party voted for the local plan, so how do you...
We did vote for the local plan, yes, because the argument over land use, future proposal and everything else went on for 11 years. And we had, from 2014, when something was submitted... Right, let me go back. Initially, we obviously have to prepare it's a duty of the local authority to prepare a local plan. End of. They have to. All local authorities have to have a local plan for 15 years normally. So Harrogate, naturally, when the other one ran out after 15 years, they set up and looked into the next one.
But you could have opposed it, couldn't you?
You could have opposed it, but after 11 years and having 6 years without any local plan in place and having 6 years of utter chaos, a developer's dream, because the council was virtually powerless to stop all the applications coming in because we hadn't got the control. And the inspectors would come along and say, well, yeah, approved. That's why a lot of the development you see now, currently going on, were allowed, because at the time they were approved, there wasn't a local plan in place. That's why you have to have a local plan. It doesn't mean, it didn't. We objected to various sites. I objected to several. There wasn't one in my ward, actually, because all the ones that had gone on in my ward had been approved, which I opposed at the time. But anyway.
Do you think things will improve under the new Unitary authority?
Well, legally, John's question was about whether it will change. Legally, local councils can't refuse to accept any planning application. What they can do is judge it and say whether they want the plan or not. And then they have to have the right grounds for refusing it. And, as we have seen in the past, sometimes when we have refused, Richborough was refused, and went to appeal, and guess what? An inspector came along and approved it. This is always the problem. I mean, there's lots of planning applications we've opposed, and the committees have gone against it and opposed, and then inspectors have come along and approved. Starbucks is another thing. They're not a development, residential, but it's the same sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, over the years I've had in Starbeck, we've had takeaways. For over about 20 years ago, there's a spate of takeaway applications. 15 we've got, and 13 of those were opposed, organised people went to committee, opposed it, rejected it. On appeal, inspectors came along and allowed them.
Okay, all right.
So you have to have the right enforcement laws to make sure that the council, when it does refuse, is on good grounds.
Thank you. So, John, you live in Kingsley, so obviously you're familiar with housing developments. Bill, can you just...
I mean, the point of engagement here is not locally, but with government. The reason we have the planning arrangements which we have at the minute, and the reason the arithmetic is such that we have this huge demand for allocating land, is nothing to, as I said in my presentation, is more to do with greed rather than need, and it's the greed of the developers. They're building the houses they think they can sell with the greatest margins. A friend of ours lives in Boroughbridge, and there's a huge estate going up there. None of the houses, they're all taken, all those houses, not by people who live in the area or going to move in the area, but people who live in the Middle East and so on, who are just investing in property to sublet to other people. One of our kids lived for a time in a set of flats up in the centre of town, a very prestigious sort of location. There were 9 flats on his staircase. He was the only resident living there. The remaining 8 were people who'd bought the premises as a speculative venture. At the moment, our housing policy nationally is a total train wreck, purely for the interests of people who invest in the ruling party.
But what would you do about it?
I would, as I say, I'd aim at government and change the legislation because, as has been said already, local councils are strapped for making sensible decisions. What can I say? It's not possible to make a sensible decision locally now with local knowledge and local interest because of the way the legislation is drafted in the interests purely of the developer.
Okay, thanks very much. Chris Watt from the Labour Party, would you like to?
Thanks. Well, I mean, the short answer to John's question about whether it's right that the council continues to approve these developments is no. And that's why, as I mentioned at the beginning, I've been working with local residents to oppose, for instance, the developments on Kingsley Drive, and spoke at the council on behalf of residents when the councillors were persuaded by the strength of feeling in the local area to reject the Persimmon development last year. Because what's on Kingsley Drive is a classic example of the wrong place to build and in the wrong way. The area has no extra infrastructure being put into those developments. The roads are already clogged, the parking is appalling, it's destroying green spaces, there are badgers on those fields, and the lack of social housing and affordable housing in that development is absolutely appalling.
But you're saying similar things to what the other candidates have said. I mean, why should people vote for you rather than the other parties? Because everyone seems to be in agreement here.
I certainly think Sarah particularly made some absolutely excellent points. But what we need, because I think in the second part of John's question was whether things will get better or worse. And frankly, I think with the council in Northallerton, Harrogate's going to have less of a voice because it's going to be a much smaller part of the new council. So if people vote for the same and don't vote for a stronger voice in opposition to some of these plans, and the ruling parties are allowed to continue on the way they are, then that's going to be more of a problem. So that's the thing that people need to do, is to vote for a more diverse council and vote for strong local champions for our area.
Thank you very much. John Hansard, who asked the question, do you feel reassured by anything you've heard, or do you have any confidence that things will change?
I have very little confidence that things will change. I think that when this new authority government's on,
Yeah, okay, well, on that optimistic note, the next question is from Arnold Wakenham. Could you identify?
I was born in Harrogate 64 years ago, and I was the first ruling party councillor in Harrogate, and the last apparently. But I'm going to be the first ruling party county councillor as well, because I'm standing in Lisburn. I really feel I'm isolated from this meeting, and I think what we have to do is break down the barriers that isolate me. Chairman, I know that there's no preambles, but I'll get
Yeah.
thank you very much for organising a really good meeting, Chairman. We're 550 square miles in Harrogate district, and you're talking about the town. And there's loads of people out there that are going hungry, that can't afford to heat the houses, that can't get on public transport, because public transport doesn't exist. We have to unite our community of Harrogate, and we have to unite our community of North Yorkshire as well. My question, Chairman,
Yeah.
is when now they don't get elected at that chair there, more than 45 of them at county, and you and the independents have won on behalf of my and your community, will you lot work together to do what's best for our environment and for our society, rather than fight the differences?
Okay, interesting question. Chris, what would you like to? Apologies.
Thanks. It's an excellent question, and again, give a short answer. The answer is yes, because I'm in this at the end of the day because I want to serve my community. Now I'm standing in a seat in the middle of town in Fairfax and Starbeck, and they would be my first priority. But you're right, there is a wider issue, because we'd be there to represent the whole of North Yorkshire as well, and to speak on behalf of the residents across North Yorkshire. And that includes in the rural areas as well. So yeah, I'm happy to work with people of all other parties if I'm
But
elected.
you say that, but Labour won't cooperate in any electoral pacts beforehand, will you? You're putting candidates in every division. I think there were some talks about trying to get more cooperation between opposition parties. Why does Labour not participate in that?
Well, the technical answer is we're not allowed to by national rules, but probably the better answer is that, no, we think that it's a good idea to actually present a positive Labour vision. If I wanted to elect a Liberal Democrat, then I'd join the Liberal Democrats. If I wanted to elect a Green, I'd join the Greens.
What about those that would say that that's all well and good, but it just lets in the Conservatives?
But if people vote positive, then they can get what they want. But people need to vote for what they want. There's far too much, unfortunately, there's an awful lot of tactical voting that goes on here because people are duped into thinking that they have to vote tactically. People can vote positively, then they can get what they want. So we're asking people to vote for a positive Labour vision for our area to get Labour councillors in.
Okay. Bill? Would you cooperate?
It's interesting to hear your observations. Last evening there was a Zoom event organised by Compass. I don't know whether anybody witnessed it or was there, but one or two people. And it was a very valuable hour's discussion of about 80 people attended that event. And there was discussion from various areas of the country, particularly from areas in Surrey and Richmond, about alliances of various kinds. And the result of discussions there between what you might call the progressive parties was very interesting. But just by the way, in terms of alliances, the Tories are really very good at alliances and pacts and compacts, because they did it with the Brexit Party, they've done it with UKIP, and that's largely the reason why they secured such a large majority at the last general election. But the interesting thing about the discussion about these home county areas, which were formerly all Tory dominated, because of constructive discussions and local compacts, all the progressive parties got more seats, and the Tories lost control I think, Surrey County Council, I think it was, and other places. So, in fact, it's a very positive way forward, even within our ramshackle first-past-the-post system.
Okay. Philipp Broadbank, what do you, the Lib Dems, cooperate?
Yeah, well, I mean, we do at County Hall, we do work with independents and Labour on issues that we share an agreement, you know, on things that we agree on, and that happens quite often actually. And obviously that in a situation where yes, the Conservatives lose the majority, that's what would be working towards. You'd have to work towards that to get a sensible administration, agree the policies, and for the next 4 years you've got the way you can go ahead. And I think that is certainly the way forward. It's the way. I mean, to me, the tactical voting does go on. Yes, quite right too, because we have a voting system that basically says divide and rule. If you have a multitude of candidates standing and there's a hardcore Conservative vote there, guess who's going to win on a split vote? The Conservative. And that's what happens too often in our elections. If we had proportional representation, which I've advocated for the last 50 years, I haven't got very far with it, but it's something that I absolutely believe in. Wherever you live in the country with PR, you could vote whichever way you wanted for what you wanted, because it wouldn't matter. Your vote would count. And that's the whole point of this stupid electoral system. You have to get people to, at the moment, work out which is the best person. Yes, positively is fine, but you end up still, unfortunately, with somebody who you don't want in, simply because the vote has been split.
Okay.
So I think working with others, yes, we have to do that.
All right. Thanks very much. Just keep. Okay, the next question. Oh, sorry. Sorry, apologies.
Well, actually, yeah, I totally agree. We need to work together, but I also think we need to take party politics, actually, in local governments. That's what's actually needed. And in this election coming up, there's actually more independents standing in this election than Liberal Democrats. So I think we need to listen to our residents. We need to get independents in who actually care about residents, who will listen to residents and represent them. But when we're in, we need to work together. We need to work together because we represent you. And we need to do the best for our residents.
Could I just comment on Boston?
Just very briefly.
An example. Boston Council, a few years back, for 34 councillors, 28 were independents. Everybody said, great, we've got rid of all the parties. Well, 2 or 3 left, party councillors. Within 2 years, because they couldn't agree on anything, they agreed for their own area, but they couldn't overall get any policy worked out that they would agree on. And within 2 years, they fell apart.
Okay, thanks for that. Right, the next question is from Barbara. Would you like the hand of the microphone, Connor? Thank you.
I live in a rural area, so we need a car. We have no infrastructure.
Where do you live?
Shaw Mills. So we're in the back and beyond with no shops, so we need the car for the doctors, hospital, etc.
Yeah.
We don't just use the car to come into Harrogate. When we're in here tonight, I'll go shopping because I'm not going to waste my time coming back in. So how would you feel about having a bypass on the Killingall side?
Right.
Thank you.
Sarah, would you like to first this time?
I think it's a really valid question, actually, because I feel...
But do you support it?
Do you know what? I would actually support a western bypass because at the moment, residents, we live in a really rural county and residents are really vilified for using their cars. And we do live, you know, if you live in Harrogate, I live in the centre of town, I walk, you know, up to 2-3 miles into town every day. It's not a problem for me, but like this lady over here, you have to use a car. I've lived in Burnt Yates as well, so I understand the need for a car because there's no sustainable public transport. So I think the only way we can try and alleviate some of this congestion, I do support a western bypass. I think we can't think about putting a bypass through the Nid Gorge.
Do you really think that would be a popular policy, though, build more roads?
I think you just can't get away from it. You know, at the end of the day, we are a tourist town. Have you seen the queues on Wetherby Road and coming in up on Leeds Road? That's tourists, and that's people that work in Harrogate. So we need to do something about it, or we need to build genuine affordable homes for those people, or we just tell the tourists to go away. We need the tourists. We're a tourist town. We need it for our economy. Okay. So well, I think we need a Western bypass. It's not a popular decision, but I think we need it.
Bill, would the Greens support building more roads?
The statistics tell you very clearly that without exception, road building increases the traffic flow and therefore it is not an answer to a situation of this kind. Certainly, as I'm the candidate for Killinghall, I would not be in favour of the bypass for Killinghall, even though I've witnessed the horrendous experience which people have who live at that junction in Killinghall and Skipton Road. The point is, you've got to get this straight about my introductory comments. Cars are very soon going to be a thing of the past, individual cars. It doesn't mean that nobody will have cars or cars will be forbidden. They will just, by means of attrition, hopefully be reduced enormously in quantity. Okay. Secondly, local transport systems can be intelligent and what they call smart to allow individual people who want to travel in a sort of taxi arrangement to do it properly and affordably without and easily and without the necessity of owning a car, and to be travelling on roads which would be relatively, compared with today, traffic-free.
Okay, Chris, what would you like to... Where do you stand on this? Killinghall bypass, yes or no?
Firstly, just briefly on the last question, just to say that I agree with a couple of my colleagues, and I personally, and also as a local Labour Party, we support PR for elections as well. Okay. In terms of the bypass, I believe that we should give straight answers to straight questions, even if it disappoints the questioner, so I'm afraid I don't. However, I think that you make a very valid point, and one of the problems that there is in a lot of rural areas, and for people who do genuinely need their cars, both in rural and our more urban areas, is that we've got such massive congestion, and that can be tackled by improving our public transport. So, for instance, not just reversing the cuts that Northern Rail are making, but improving our local rail services, improving our local bus services, so that people have got options other than the car, and so that for those that do genuinely need to use their cars, the congestion is a lot better than it currently is, because at the moment, as we all know, it's absolutely appalling, and we've already spoken a lot about the housing, and some of that unsustainable housing is just going to make matters worse.
Okay. Philip, yes or no to Killinghall?
Sorry, Barbara, but it's a no. Road building is not the way of the future. I'm sorry, but the way of the future is, as Chris has said, actually, I agree, it's public transport, investment in that, and encouraging people to get around differently. Change is not going to be easy. We know that, and there will be strong resistance to people doing things as they've always done it. But, you know, we've got to think about the planet here, and road building is not an option for the future. In fact, I don't think you'll get many places now that will want to build roads, because the investment in public transport is the way you're going to have to do it, and that again will cost. The council taxpayers and national government taxpayers will have to be willing to support that as well. So sorry, Barbara, but it's a no.
We just have a show of hands from the audience as to how many people would support a Western bypass. And how many would oppose it? How many would oppose it? Few more opposing it, but interesting.
But do those people live in rural locations then? The people that are opposing it, do they live in rural locations?
Well, anyway. Thanks for that. Right. Just briefly, if you don't mind, yeah.
I've got a whole file. 15 years ago, I campaigned in our local village to get public transport. I know about how our bus works, I know about the wheels, I know
Yeah.
about everything. I tried every bus company under the sun.
Yeah.
And I was told they couldn't get over our bridge because it's twisting. Now, if there's an accident on the Ripon Road or anywhere else, what do we get? The bus is what comes through. I've lobbied our MP.
Yeah.
I asked for one diverted from Amswaite. It
Yeah.
comes to Birtswith and turns round at a doctor's.
Yeah.
Once a month. We didn't want it every week. We would like a bus. We can't go to Paycliffe.
Okay.
So how are we supposed to? We can't walk, and
Yeah.
Transdevi no way will put a bus on, whether it's a small bus or anything.
Okay. Thank you. Good. Interesting point. Next question from Tamsin. Thank you.
Thank you. Given a recent survey indicated that the environmental performance from Harrogate Borough Council is absolutely appalling. I think out of 314 councils, Harrogate was in the bottom 10. What would the candidates do to try and rectify this situation?
Okay. Philip, would you like to go first?
Okay, thank you. There are several things they can do. On the council house, they can do solar panels, do that, invest in that. Obviously, they need to be a national scheme as well, and that the new council could work with that on promoting getting rid of the boilers in the houses and replacing that
To be
with
fair, they are doing
energy
quite a lot
efficient.
with
It's starting. The thing is starting, but there is a long way to go. And Harrogate's record does need a lot to be desired. But there are all sorts of initiatives. I mean, they're going to have to get involved in major green initiatives of various things over the next 3-4 years. Because, but again, and that will be an issue that voters will have to decide and will decide. Is the cost, because all these things, you don't get anything for nothing these days, and there's got to be something for voters to think about as well as the initiative. But we need to think green and get in umpteen various initiatives underway. And Harrogate, as you say, yeah, its record isn't that brilliant.
Okay. Chris, obviously money is tight, so realistically, what can be done?
Well, the local Labour Party's got a really strong record on the environment. So, for instance, we were involved in the campaign to protect the Nid Gorge, in the Longlands Common campaign, and now currently, as I've mentioned a couple of times, in the campaign to protect local green spaces from overdevelopment. But there are a number of things that the council can do on top of that. So Philipp's mentioned the housing stock, so it's important that the council retrofit its council housing stock. And also when new housing developments are proposed, if the council is going to actually approve them, it needs to insist that they've got proper insulation, they've got proper renewable energy systems in place. Another thing that also can be done, which is often overlooked, but actually support our local council workers, because we have terrible problems in our area with, for instance, recycling rates. And we need to actually support our council workers, give them a decent wage so that we can get more refuse collectors, more recycling collectors, and have decent recycling rates in our area. And that would make a major difference, not just to the green credentials of the area, but also, I think, be very, very popular with residents, from what I'm certainly hearing on the doorstep.
Okay. Bill, I mean, I'm sure you've got strong views on this, but if you could just... Briefly, yeah, just limit it to 1 or 2 points.
Just 1 or 2 points. I think the first thing I would want to do would be to promote the idea of local biodiversity advocates. People to pick up their own interest and to give them some support, either through funding small groups or whatever it is, so that they can make a noise in their own locality about their own particular enthusiasm around the environmental issue and what's important for their own locality, their street, for example. That's the first thing I'd do. The other thing is I would try and get the local council to educate its own workforce about responsible management of its environmental context. The weed killers they use, all the materials they use, the methods they use, the timings of their mowing, and that sort of thing, to optimise it in terms of the needs of the local environment. There is a really serious problem about retrofitting houses, which I think you may be hearing more about it in the news in future weeks. But the country as a whole has got a huge pending crisis in relation to the need to change the heating system in all our domestic houses, almost without exception.
Okay.
But that's enough for now.
Thank you. Sarah, what would you do?
So again, it goes back to policies, so officers. So any houses that are now built, they should be a fabric first approach. No home should be built today that actually needs to be retrofitted. It's absolutely ridiculous. And so one thing we need to enforce is that officers create policies where developers can't move or change things. The policies are there and they have to abide by them. The other thing I would do is, we really need to look at things like wildlife corridors. There's fences everywhere. I've been around all my division, in the last couple of weeks, just really looking, and actually fences. What about hedgehogs? How can they get through these fences?
I mean, it's all very well saying that, but you're calling for more roads to be built. You're
I am
opposed to the station gate.
No, yeah.
The Otley Road cycle path. I mean, it's sort of, how does that square with what you're saying?
Because, thing is though, John, there's no point building all these houses that need to be retrofitted. That's going to cost people money. At the moment, we've got a cost of living crisis, we've got a rural county, and at the end of the day, fuel poverty is a real thing. So I'm thinking about we should be looking at community energy schemes. We could be looking at hydro. There's different ways, there's different innovative solutions that we can all look at. And actually, we need to discuss that as a community. What can we do? What can be achieved? It's not just about the councillors. We need to talk about this as the public.
All right, thank you. Right, the next question, we've just got a few more to get through before we wind up. From Pat. Pam, sorry. Forgive me, sorry, Pam.
This is a very simple question. I apologise to the audience. You all seem very wise and erudite and asking very knowledgeable things. What's a transport corridor, to Sarah? When you said, I agree with everything you said about having smaller buses, or someone said smaller buses, more buses. How fantastic would that be? Cheaper prices. I'm lucky I've got a card, so I get on and off the buses for nothing, which is wonderful. But what do you mean by a transport corridor?
Okay, who would like to address that? Oh, okay, go for it.
So a transport corridor is basically where there are sustainable travel options. So for example, at Hornbeam Park, you've got a site next to the Harrogate College that's been earmarked for yet more office blocks. But shouldn't that site, if we do need homes, genuine affordable homes I'm talking about, not 4 and 5 bedroom executive homes, but can they not be built there? So people don't need to get in their cars. They can walk to large places of employment like the hospital, the schools, the town centre, and also get the train. But we need smaller buses so we can have more buses in more locations, like in the old days when we had the hopper buses. In my area, they're building 4,500 homes at the end of Otley Road. It's not well known, but where are the buses? At the moment, I spoke to people on the doorstep. They are elderly people, and they have to go in the car. There is no buses, and that's in Harrogate, let alone the rural communities.
Okay. Anyone else got any views on transport corridor?
On all these areas, you obviously will need to expand the bus service to the new estates as one of the options as they develop, and I think that's the same with quite a few areas that we have. I think public transport and investment, again, I've said it before, but public transport, investment in that, and the trains and the buses are certainly the way. But it will cost, and people will obviously, when it comes to deciding what they want to do, they will take that into account. But it's something we need to do if you're going to encourage people to use their cars less.
Okay. Any views on transport corridors? No? Okay, we'll move on. Thank you for the question. Daniel has a question, I believe.
Yes, my question is, with a currently elected member who has represented his electorate for decades, openly admitting this evening that he and his colleagues signed off on an inadequate town plan, do you and the other candidates represent the future of the town?
When you say the future, what do you mean?
Well, their ideas, their concepts, their beliefs, are they the future?
Okay. Are you the future?
Am I the future? We signed off a local plan, first of all, because we had to have something down on paper for the future. You can't go on, as we did go on, for 10 years arguing and being vulnerable to developers who just came along, put applications in wherever, and got permission because we hadn't got a local plan.
But isn't in an election where housing seems to be a big issue, is that a problem for you on the doorstep?
It's certainly an issue. People do raise, obviously, about the amount of housing around. Yes, of course it is.
But people can just say, well, you voted for it.
Yeah, well, I didn't. Some of the sites that are up, I mean, there's various sites where I've actually got planning. I was at the same planning as Chris and spoke against the same application. You know, there are areas where you can speak, and indeed you do succeed in opposing the developments. You actually get the voting against, but then other times inspectors come along and overrule. But you have to have something in place, otherwise you are vulnerable to developers.
Okay. Sarah, are you the future? I mean, I think the question alludes to whether you need a different direction. Is that what you mean? Because it's quite a nebulous question in a way, isn't it?
I think there's a different way of doing things, and I think really as an independent, the reason I'm standing is I'm just really sick of party politics, and I think the future is actually listening to our residents and representing them, and I think we need a more diverse council. At the moment it's very heavily, it's all men, or older men as well, and I don't think it really represents our community. So that's one of the reasons I'm standing, and I think that's the future. We have to look at that, you know, inclusion and diversity of a elected council within our county.
You say you're against party politics, but you're still standing as a group.
I'm standing as an independent, though.
But there is an independent group, isn't there?
Well, so when we become an alliance, if we get elected, we will become a group then. But at the moment, we are representing our own divisions as individuals. We're not a group per se at the moment. We will only become a group, a coalition, when we come in to become elected within the county council, and we will work with other independents. And incidentally, there's already 13 independents in the county council. It's a bigger number than any other party, obviously apart from the Conservatives who aren't here tonight. But I think the future is just change. We've had a lot of party politics. Let's just have a change.
Thank you. Chris, are you the future?
Well, I moved to my area in Starbeck just over a decade ago, and I've got involved in my community because I love it. So that's why, for instance, I led the campaign to reopen Starbeck Baths. That's why I've been involved in a number of other community campaigns. That's why I support the local swimming school, for example, in Starbeck Primary, which is a wonderful, wonderful school. At the end of the day, if people want change, then they need to vote for it. Labour's got a fresh, positive vision. We need a more diverse council. Labour's the second biggest formal party, if you take the independents as being actually independent, on North Yorkshire County Council at the moment, but we need a stronger Labour voice on there to actually oppose the Tories and to get real change. If you want more of the same, then vote for more of the same. If you want fresh voices on there, then vote for it. And I'm looking to be a fresh voice on the council and to get more Labour representation to give a fresh voice on that council.
Okay. Bill, do you have any thoughts on this subject as a long-standing campaigner?
Well, I'm just about beginning to identify my own career, having worried about what I was going to do for the previous few decades. I think age is not the issue. I think it's the imagination and principles of the party or the campaign which you're supporting. So don't be confused by Anno Domini, so to speak, because there are quite a lot of young old fogies.
Okay. Question from Alison Harris, I believe. Thank you.
There's been no reference to the basic reason for the abolition of the existing councils and the creation of a unitary authority, namely for the creation of an executive mayor for York and North Yorkshire. The government call this devolution, but is it? What views do the candidates have of the executive mayor proposal?
Okay. Interesting question. That's all part of the process of reorganisation. A mayor for North Yorkshire, similar to Andy Burnham, or someone like that. How do you feel about that, Chris Watt?
I'm not a fan of it, to be honest. A little bit like Philipp, actually. I support more say for local councillors. I mean, we've been talking a lot tonight about housing, and the Tory government have removed the rights of local people to have their formal say recognised in planning applications. And the creation of the new council is basically a piece of gerrymandering by the Tories to try and make sure that they stay in power and that they've got even more power. So I'm not a fan of the power of a mayor being concentrated in the hands of one person. I would rather see local councillors having more of a say and being able to represent their communities.
Okay. Bill?
This whole reorganisation is both a problem and an opportunity. We've tried to emphasise, I think, all the speakers about the strength of the opportunity and what's available to us through this. But the context is a period of austerity which is unprecedented in its length, and it's continuing. The real problem over the next couple of years will not be whether the mayor is going to be any value or not, or whether the new council is going to be any good or not, is how to cope with the significantly reduced resources, which will, as I say, the gradient is still downwards, and therefore there may be some apparent smokes and mirrors which give the impression of more money, but it won't be there. And so there are going to be desperate times, I think, over the next few years for all local authorities, but particularly here in this area, and therefore more importance that we generate methods of community cohesion so that united voices locally can be making clear to government that they are not happy with this austerity programme, which is now in its 13th year.
Okay. Thanks very much. Sarah, how do you feel about the subject of mayors?
Well, unfortunately, it's coming. If you, and I've actually read the Levelling Up paper, all 526 pages of it. And actually, we're all back at the polling stations in 2024, because that's when it's coming in. The whole point of us becoming a unitary authority is to railroad in the combined authority, and that is the mayor. So the mayor will control it, just like they do in Manchester, just like they do in Birmingham. So the question is it right for Yorkshire? Is it right for North Yorkshire? So I feel that, a bit like Bill actually, it's all rhetoric. So the government say we'll get more money because devolution will happen. Will it happen? That's the major question. So my thoughts on a combined authority is I don't feel it's a good idea. I think we need to represent and listen to our communities again, going back to devolution, to local communities, not this whole power-hungry mayor who's going to control all of North Yorkshire and York. So no, I don't agree with combined authorities.
And finally, Philipp, are you going to support a mayor?
I don't support the mayor. I don't support giving power to one person. It's York and North Yorkshire that the new mayor will come. And the carrot dangling before everybody is that if we have a mayor, the government will give us extra money for devolution to devolve power to the region.
And what's wrong with that
That's
one?
the carrot. But I mean, why don't they just give it to the elected authorities and let the members there decide?
But when you see what some of these mayors have achieved in say, Greater Manchester or Teesside, do you not feel that that's a model we should aspire to?
No, I don't. No, I honestly don't think it's the right. It certainly takes away democracy. Democracy is taken further away. I think that if they want local authorities to have some influence and real power, give them the money that the mayor was going to have, and let them, the elected members, decide what is best for the area that they represent. The Unitary authority, I think it's going to be a very large authority, and it's going to be difficult to make it work, but we've got to make sure the system in place, decision-making system, is right and as local as we can be. But I don't believe in giving the power. I don't believe in police commissioners, to be honest. But, you know, all power to one person, no. It isn't what I regard as democracy.
Okay, we've just got time for one, possibly two more questions. Jemima? Thanks for being patient.
Thank you. Jemima Parker, from Chair of Zero Carbon Harrogate. And firstly, can I just thank the Stray Ferret for putting this event on. It's excellent to have this opportunity. And my question, some of which has been covered, so you may wish to focus on slightly different parts of this, was what will your priorities be, both in policies and practice, in meeting the commitment to decarbonise, building a flourishing low-carbon economy, and a climate-resilient North Yorkshire, and particularly we're focusing on the Harrogate area. I'm conscious that we haven't yet mentioned anything about local energy generation or agriculture.
Okay. Thank you. Sarah, would you like to give us your thoughts on that?
I did actually touch on community energy schemes actually earlier. So my thoughts and my policies is, again, it's working with community groups, and it's actually what those communities need. So again, talking about a rural economy as well as an urban economy, there's different sources that we need to look at. So to decarbonise, we need to look at different solutions, but I think we do need to also recognise that some of these will actually cost a hell of a lot of money, that not necessarily our local government will actually get that kind of money to do that. That's implemented by central government, and that's central government policy. But we can lobby central government to do these different agendas to change things. But I think we do need to work with communities. There's some really fantastic schemes actually going on at the moment down in Cambridge, where whole villages are totally in fuel poverty right now. They're reliant on oil for their heating, and they're actually doing a district heating system that will be net carbon for the whole village. Obviously, the upfront cost for that is very high, but they're going to be taking it back because it's owned by the community.
Okay.
So yes, I think communities are the way forward, and working with communities to decarbonise.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. I think thanks for the question, Jemima. I think there are several things we can do with energy. I've got saying to the government that we can become a carbon negative region. I mean, a lot of this will be not just specific to Harrogate, it will be basically a county-wide thing. That's something we can do. Low carbon housing, retrofit programs, again, something we can do. We can do low carbon energy projects in the area as well. And I think that's something that we should look at. Energy generation demonstrator programs, I think that's something that we need to lobby for as well. A lot of this is to lobby nationally for it. And also there's something called the Pan-Northern Regional Green Bond. That's something that, again, we could ask for. And also joint working on the rollout of carbon capture, utilisation and storage technology is something we should be looking at as well.
Okay, thank you. Chris Watt, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so I'll try not to repeat the answers that I've previously given, but I mean, one of the things that I would do as a local councillor would be to work with local community groups. So, for instance, I worked with Starbeck School and also Zero Carbon Harrogate and Starbeck in Bloom a few months ago to encourage people who were waiting at Starbeck Crossing, for instance, in their cars to actually turn their engines off, or even better, to not use their cars at all. And we were happy to hand out leaflets from Zero Carbon Harrogate to that end. A lot of what the other speakers have spoken about communities is really important as well. And also I think we need to think about businesses as well. Can we incentivise businesses who are going to operate in a sustainable way and also invest in low carbon skills so that businesses can actually employ people who have got the sorts of skills that we need to work in a zero carbon manner?
Okay. Finally, Bill.
How many people here have seen Don't Look Up? Well, can I recommend those of you who haven't seen it, find somebody with a Netflix account and watch Don't Look Up. Because for me, this is one of those Don't Look Up moments. The actual, as I said in my introductory comments, the seriousness of the threat is extreme. People talk in terms of how close to midnight, how many seconds from midnight we are in terms of disaster. It is very close. I heard a presentation on the District Council's carbon reduction policy the other day from the Cabinet member for that, responsible for that subject. And he spent an hour saying precisely nothing. This policy, which has been developed over the last 4 years, does not contain a single number about when anything will be done. And the global issue, the advice we're getting from the IPCC is that the timescale for drastic action to decarbonise or reduce our carbon dependency is very short. And I mean, one example is that I keep thinking, I live in a road with 25 houses in it, and we have spent most of the last 8 years doing bits and pieces to improve our household. But the other 24, and we're nearly ready in a sense, sort of oven ready for carbon neutrality, and we have very low fuel bills and so on. But the other 24 haven't started. And yet they're saying the targets should be met within 5 years or thereabouts. We're just not getting how serious the problem is and how much needs to be done both individually and nationally to address this really serious issue. I feel like Mr. Noah sitting there. You know, I've come to the meeting and people are talking about it and saying, what about the water rising over here? And he's just telling people, build a bloody boat. Okay. And that's the thing, the situation we're in now is it is a very serious matter. And you've heard it from me, and I hope in 5 years' time when I come for re-election, I don't have to say I told you so.
All right. Thank you. We're just about out of time. I'm just mindful that we haven't asked any questions tonight about the Harrogate Convention Centre, which is potentially the most valuable asset in the district. It's worth 47, and there's a proposal to spend 47 million refurbishing it. Just very, very quickly, can you all just tell me, do you think the new local authority, if you were elected, would you support that continuing?
We need to support the convention centre because we're a major tourist town and we need major tourist facilities.
So you would spend that money in?
I would certainly, I mean, I'd have a look at it. I'd be a new councillor, so I'd have to go into all of the details of it, but I certainly think we should support the convention centre.
Will it float, is the question. It is an important resource in the area, but it needs to be very carefully planned, and we don't want it to be a white elephant, and we want it to be a strategic resource, and I don't know how to do it because I don't know enough about the case.
Okay. Philip, just very briefly.
Yes, very briefly. I think in principle I'm certainly in favour of the doing things to the convention centre, but we have to look at detailed reports coming up as to where the money will come from to pay for it. And as to making a profit, It used to make a profit at one time, and it's only in the last 10 years where it's been making losses. But you can have a business that will be successful and actually bring money in to the. But yes, it obviously needs investment, and I think you've got to find not just the local council. You've got to find other sources of and grants, etc., to get the money, and that's I think what it needs to be looked at.
Okay, Sarah.
Yes, I would support the conference centre, but what I wouldn't support is just a conference centre on that public land. What I would really support is a site that is a building with multi-use, so including housing on the site, but affordable housing for local workers.
So you would change the use of the...
I would change the use of it. It could be a conference centre, it'd be more flexible for space. We live in a post-COVID world. I don't know about any of you guys, but I haven't been to any conferences in the last 2 years, and I can't see myself going to any conferences. Everything now is done either hybrid or on Zoom. So I think we really do need to look at a business case, and we don't want it to be a white elephant that taxpayers have to pay for.
Okay. Well, we're out of time.
Could I just point out the Royal Hall, when it was first built, that was sort of the white elephant as well.
Just want to thank all our candidates for attending tonight, and also say a quick thank you to the Wesley Centre for hosting this event, to, in particular, Pippa, Elliot and Julian for working tonight. I believe your name is Julian Smith, is that right? So, no, not the Julian Smith. And thank all the audience for coming. We really appreciate it. We think these events are important for local democracy and really are great for you for turning out. Thank you. Good night.